Welcome to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, brought to you by Pilma. This podcast helps lead lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Here is your legal marketing expert and host, Ken Hardison.
Well, hello, everyone. This is Ken Hardison, and welcome to another episode of Grow Your Law Firm. And today we have the honor and the privilege of having Miss Micki Love, who is the guru on law firm management and marketing. And we are very honored to have you here, Micki. We really are.
Thanks, Ken.
Years and years of experience. She's helped a lot of law firms grow tremendously over the past 20 years. You know, I just want you to tell your story. I mean, how did you get started in all this law and management and marketing stuff?
Yeah, that's a fun story, Ken. Thanks for having me. I love being around you and other leaders in the industry. I always learn so much from you guys. So thanks for even sharing your time with me today. But my story is a long one. I started in Bowling Green, Kentucky, a little bitty town, while I was still in high school as a runner and a file clerk at a law firm. And I stayed there while I went to college and finished my accounting degree. And I moved into the accounting department, but quickly realized I didn't like debits and credits as much as I loved learning how to make more dollar signs on the bottom line. So I was fortunate enough to work with some really great people who allowed me to learn the ins and outs of the industry from the bottom up. So there's not a job in the law firm that I haven't done except that of an attorney. I was a runner. I was the receptionist. I was the bookkeeper. I was the CFO. I was the CMO. I was the COO. I ran the mass tort department for a long time. So I just loved it. I love working with the programs to get all the KPIs that we need in order to figure out how to do things better. And from there, I was able to run a marketing and management seminar with the partners of that firm for 20 years. And so I got to be in the room with great minds like yourself and many others throughout that process and really hear what was working and what wasn't working, and to be able to take that and try to put my own spin on it and figure out if we could make it better. And so I just enjoy it so much. And I love watching the firms I've worked with grow to be huge firms, and it's just fun.
And then you left there and you went to Vista, right?
Oh yeah, I do have more of a story. I forget.
Yeah.
I was at the law firm for 25 years. And when I left there, I went with Chad Dudley, and he owned Vista Consulting at the time. And so he and I jumped on consulting with law firms, and along with Tim Mackey. And we did that for several years. And then Arnie Malham, who owns CJ Advertising, he decided he was ready to sell his agency and move on. And he reached out to Chad and myself and said he only wanted to sell the agency if he could sell it to people he knew would take good care of his clients and of the agency employees. And so we thought it would be a great thing to do. And really kind of set us apart from other personal injury agencies, because we had the law firm operational background along with the marketing background, and you can't find that at just any agency. So that's kind of where we're at today. And we've just kicked off what we call the accelerator programs. It's kind of new, Ken. I'm not sure if we've had a chance to even talk about this yet, but we're teaching firms how to increase their average fees through the accelerator program. Which is something that Chad and his firm has done a tremendous job of doing. And I, again, have been lucky enough to ride along on that process and learn a bunch. And so now we're going to teach other firms how to do the same thing so that clients across the country get the best representation possible when they're working with one of the firms that we've been able to work with.
Yeah, I know y'all just had an event in Nashville. Was that part of that program? Was that kind of like the launching pad for that?
Yeah, that was the inaugural event. So we did a day and a half event in Nashville back in March. And I think we had over 150 people join, mostly virtual. We had some in-person attendance as well. So it's kind of the inaugural thing. And what people walked away from there realizing that it is work to get this implemented. You can't just tell your people to go do it and it happens. It takes processes and oversight to make sure it gets implemented fully. And so they started asking for us to come in and help them do that. And so from there, we spun into the accelerator, where we can really help them kind of accelerate the path to getting those average fees increased.
I just think that's wonderful. We had a bunch of Pilma members, especially mastermind members, go. and they talked highly of it. They said it was really amazing. But they did say, hey, it's going to be a lot of work. But we've got some of them trying right now to take what you and Chad told them and take it to the next level. Because I don't know if it was you or Chad or whatever, but somebody said that it's a lot easier to raise the average fee by $2,000 or $3,000 than it is to cut the acquisition cost by $2,000 or $3,000.
Absolutely. That's what we're finding, especially, the cost of everything is going up. So to get more cases is just crazy. So if you can increase your revenue without increasing your expenses, I mean, that's just a win. All that money falls right to the bottom line. So that's what we're trying to help firms really accomplish.
Yeah. So what do you think the biggest challenge is for somebody trying to manage their law firm? Because, a lot of lawyers, they just want to, they don't even want to, but some of them really do, but they just have a hard time doing it. Or the people do, the people they hire do.
Yeah, so I think people's always the hardest issue, right? Like if you didn't have to have a bunch of people, the whole process becomes a lot easier. But we're all fortunate enough to have a lot of cases coming in, which means we need people, which then means we've got to find ways that the lawyer or the owner, the managing attorney, the founder of the firm really can stay in touch with the cases that are being worked and make sure they're still worked to the standards that he or she started their firm on. Because you know how it is when you start a firm, you have a set of core beliefs that you want every case to be treated that way. And you want a certain amount of clients or you want a certain standard for your clients of treating your team members as well. But having a lawyer to stop and really think about their law firm as a business and realize that they need some business aspects really incorporated into every case they're working to make sure that those core values they started the firm with don't get lost in the volume of cases that are coming in is really the hardest thing I believe that firms face from day to day.
I tend to agree with you. I mean, you get so wrapped up in the day-to-day that you forget what were the whole roots were about, why you started this deal. I agree with you. So you're going to be talking about, so I don't want to talk about that today, but you're going to be speaking at our summit, our Pilma Super Summit, June the 27th through 29th. You're going to be talking about the Pareto principle, is that right?
Yeah, the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle. Yeah, we're super excited.
And we don't have time today because of this, but it is, I've heard you talk about it. You've talked to our, you did a presentation one time to our masterminds about it. And it really does make sense. I mean, you think about it and, but you kind of don't really think about it. It kind of just blows over your head. But when you really get down and look at the numbers, it makes a big difference. So what are some of the other deals that lawyers, like if you were going to say, these are the like top 5 things you really need to be paying attention to if you want to have an efficient law firm?
Oh gosh. So an efficient law firm, it would be the first thing I always start with is intake. So I always want to dive into what is your conversion percentage? I want to make sure that we are converting all the cases we want. So my favorite thing when I go into a law firm is they always say, well, my gut tells me that we get everything we want. Those are my favorite ones because right away I know that there's some challenges in that intake department that we can overcome because most firms don't get everything they want. Even the most highly efficient firms out there are not getting everything they want. They're usually in that 92.5% to 95% of everything they want gets converted. And so a lot of people like to track what is my sign-up percentage of the overall number of leads that we received. And that's really a deceptive number for firms because you can get a bunch of leads and not want very many of those. And you can have a really low sign-up percentage. Whereas if you look at how many you really wanted that met your firm's criteria, did you get those cases? Those are the ones we really want to concentrate on. And we want to build those chase call procedures and make sure your team really knows how to escalate those if they need help getting them to sign or giving them some advice if the injuries are bad, making sure your intake department is tracking your corporate defendants and your serious injury cases that are coming in and looking at the escalation processes for that. So hands down, always start with intake. That's where I go first and foremost every time.
I think you're absolutely right. I always say there's the most leakage there of anywhere. And I'm like you, when I hear them say, I sign up every case I want, but you ain't got a clue. You really don't have a clue. Because if you really know you don't.
Yes. Anytime they use that phrase, like my gut tells me, or I know I get everything I want, I'm like, oh boy, we're going to be able to turn this thing upside down and really find more cases for them. So it's always fun. From there, I always like to make sure that they are tracking their medical records process. So that's another area where there's a lot of leakage in time on desk. So we always measure time on desk, but I like to measure it in intervals as well. So that how much time does it take from case open date to MMI date, from MMI date to all medical records received to demand out the door. And I like to track that by a person in the firm as well. So you can see if there's someone that's struggling in a particular area, you can figure out how to give them the support they need or retrain them on what it is that they're looking for. But medical records is usually the place along that pipeline where we're tracking those intervals where we will find some real gaps. And that can cost you a lot of money, because if that client is finished treating and you're just waiting on medical records to come in, your firm is just spending dollars housing that case. And that case is not getting any more valuable than when that client finished medical treatment. So that's another place that we don't talk about a lot in our management meetings and all the seminars that we go to, but it is truly one of those places where time is lost and money is lost for law firms, in my opinion. From there, it's all about the negotiation process, right? So what should they be tracking from a negotiation standpoint? How often do they expect the attorneys to negotiate back and forth on those cases? A lot of times law firms will hire younger lawyers, and not necessarily in age, but younger in the personal injury world. So that maybe they came over from the defense side and they're used to billable hours. So the longer they hold something, the more valuable it is to them. It's exactly the opposite in our contingency world. So we got to make sure that we're constantly moving the needle on those negotiation cases, if it's right to do so, right? If we're letting it sit because it will build value, that's one thing. But if we're just letting it sit because we're not paying attention to it or not moving it correctly, that's a very inefficient gap for firms that we find a lot of times that with proper management and oversight of that number, it can really make a difference. Average fee is a huge thing. So what is the average fee for each team member in the firm or each attorney in the firm, so that we can tell if some firms are really working their cases up better than others? What can we learn from what we see with your 80-20 rule? There's so much inside of that one document that we can really pinpoint some key areas that we can dive into and try to help firms to move those cases in a different manner that might increase that average fee. Because like you said in the beginning, just $2,000 or $3,000 on every case average is going to move the needle big time, especially if you're moving 1,000 cases a month. I mean, you can do the math. That just drops a bunch of money straight to the bottom line. So I really like using that. And then the other thing that I think firms miss out on a lot is case grading. And we're not doing that to serve our clients any less, but we're doing that to see what is the value of the cases that are in our firm and to make sure that they're moving through the system the way that they should. So if you have a case with a severe injury corporate defendant, that's got a different track than a sprain, strain, whiplash, not really treating kind of client. Like, you've got to do extra things on those cases. So knowing what you have in your pipeline, making sure your attorneys are graded so that the cases get in the right hands. You don't want fresh out of law school attorney handling a corporate defendant serious injury case with no oversight. Maybe not even at all. That may need to be pulled out and sent to a chief litigator depending upon the circumstances. And I think that gets missed at firms a lot. They just kind of round robin the cases and they all get kind of dispersed, and there's no real oversight as to those things. So for me, those are a couple of big things, or I guess that's five things that I would say people need to pay attention to.
Big things. Yeah. So what do you, as far as, I know some, I've never asked you this before, but it's been on the back of my mind in the last couple of days, is I see some law firms are using the software Retrieval. I see some law firms are, I'm talking about medical records now. Let me presuppose that. We're talking about getting medical records. I know some people that use some software and do it in-house. I know some people just do it in-house and just have dedicated people doing it. I know some law firms that just outsource it out to third parties and just let them do it. I know some law firms that have actually created their own corporations. You know, they do the disclosure and everything, and they do it in-house, but they charge for it. What do you think is the best practices? What have you've been around, you've seen a lot of law firms. What do you think works the best? This episode is brought to you by Pilma Super Summit. June the 27th through the 29th, you can come and learn how to take your law firm to the next level in New Orleans at the fabulous Ritz-Carlton Hotel. Go to pilma.org/summit.
The best, in my opinion, has always been an in-house medical records company or sourcing. So even if you're not building a company in-house to bill it back to your clients, having that in-house dedicated team typically gets those medical records back faster than any outsourcing company that I've seen. However, not all firms are set up to manage the number of people that it takes to do their casework alone, let alone a whole nother department to do medical records. So if they can't see themselves managing that department correctly, then let's use an outside source, but let's make sure we manage the KPI and expectations around that company to say we would like to have all of our records back within 21 days or less. From the date we request them to the date received should be 21 days or less. And if we're outside of those ranges, then it's time to have some real good conversations with either your in-house team or your outsourced team about what can we do to make that process better and more smooth.
We're talking about that because not just that they can't afford it, but it's just so hard right now. Aren't you finding, Micki, that it's so hard just to find people to work? I mean, I'm seeing it for law firms finding lawyers, finding paralegals, finding intake people, just everybody from the top to the bottom. I mean, are you seeing the same thing?
Absolutely, across the country and all the markets that we're in, that is the number one discussion on my calls every month about employees. It's just hard to find team members right now that want to work and show up every day. Even after you hire them, they sometimes just don't come back, or they move on to another job pretty quickly with little loyalty to the person that's hired them. So it's a really difficult market right now. I have noticed in the last month, maybe 2 months, it's getting a little better to get resumes in. But prior to that, it was just a struggle to even get resumes, whether it was an attorney or, a support level team member. It was just difficult, but it's turning a little bit, but it's still hard right now.
Yeah, I mean, I was at a law firm yesterday, actually, down here where I live, and they're just having a hell of a time. I mean, and I got a paralegal now that's just burnt out and just wants to go do intake. What do I do? I said, if you're good at intakes. He said, yeah. I said, that's what you do.
Put her there.
You really don't have any choice. I said, she's going to leave you either way. If you don't.
No.
I mean, it's tough out there. It's, and I don't know what to ask for. I mean, we've got some of our masterminds, Micki, that are hiring some people over in the Philippines and some down, the verdict's still out on that. I don't know if it's going to work or not. I don't know. I don't know if you've had experience. I think it's got a lot to do with who you pick, how you pick them, and what kind of, because it's hard to, you got to manage these people remote. And that's another little challenge, as we learned from COVID, right?
Yes. I think I agree with you. I am seeing more people try the virtual assistants from overseas, if you will, to try and help bridge some of these gaps. And it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, because you still need support staff back here that can kind of help wrangle things when stuff is coming in and things of that nature. So I'll be curious to see how this plays out over the next little bit. I do think there's some, for the firms that are doing a lot of Spanish advertising, I think being able to hire some intake specialists in some Spanish speaking cultures is going to be helpful, because you can set those phones up to ring straight to those individuals. You can train them. So I think from an intake perspective, it might be a great thing for Spanish speakers or other languages maybe, but it's definitely Spanish, because that seems to be the trend for our marketing right now, is to really increase Spanish speaking ads. But as far as casework, I think it's still going to be difficult to build that relationship with a client so that you truly understand their medical issues, with some of these virtual assistants taking on more and more of that casework from your local law firms.
Well, as the president and chief operating officer of CJ Advertising, has been around forever and very reputable. I remember them when I was practicing. They represented some of my competitors, and they did a really good job, much to my sorrow. But I guess my question is, I'm trying to think how to put this. So TV, is getting more and more, and it's getting more costly or whatever, but you're still seeing people on it. But my question to you is, I remember what I was going to ask. I was actually creating a buffer while I thought about what I forgot. What I really wanted to ask you was,
I'm glad you do that too.
Yeah, I do that when I'm trying to come back. What was I going to ask her now? After hours, this is the number one thing that I hear is finding people. The number two is there's no after-hour call centers that are worth the crap anymore. Are you hearing that, or is there somebody out there? Because
I have found two that I believe are up and coming as some of the best that we're working with right now. They all kind of go through this ebbs and flow, right? So for a while, we all thought alert was the answer. And so we were all shifting over there. They are probably not on the top of a lot of people's lists anymore, at least from what I'm hearing out there in the world. But I really like Intake Services of America, ISA. That was started by Crumley Roberts law firm out of North Carolina. And they've done a great job with some of the CJ clients that they're working for. I know they're working for a lot of non-CJ clients, but I have personal insight into what they're doing for the CJ stuff. And so I know they're doing a great job for them. And then Legal Answer Edge is one of my other favorites. And I don't know, for those of you that used LIP back in the day, which was owned by Arnie Malham at CJ Advertising, Mike Harris used to run that for him. And Mike has now started his own answering service. I think it's been 2 years now that he's been up and running. And he's doing several CJ clients as well. And he's doing a fantastic job with them at Legal Answer Edge. So those two are kind of up and coming as the ones that I have been able to rely on to do a good job for our clients. When I get asked for recommendations, those are the first two that I will send people to.
Okay. Those two answer because, I remember talking to the guy at Crumley that was starting that several years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of lost contact with him. I didn't know,
Yeah.
when it was in its infancy. It's been several years ago.
No, I think they started and then they pulled back a little bit while they refined the systems a little bit. And then they started up again, pushing for more clients because they wanted to get it right. So
That makes sense. I remember Mike Harris because I used to use LIP back in, I guess, the late 90s and early 2000s.
Yeah. Mike was great. He was really experienced at it. So it's been good to watch him grow something that people can rely on. He's doing a great job, as is ISA, with these lead generations that are coming in. So having those leads, if you're buying leads from a lead generator, having those pointed toward Mike's company or ISA, and they can get on the phone with them quicker because they have so many people that can do those outbound dials as opposed to the people in the office trying to reach outbound while receiving inbound calls. So for me, it's been, they've both been super successful for our clients, and I enjoy that.
You're a wealth of information today.
Oh, well, thank you.
Got one last question because we're getting close to our 30 minutes. So are you seeing, this is something, and I don't want to reveal it, but we did a bunch of, for some of our Pilma members, and I'm not going to say even, but online inquiries, and over 50% of them were not answered within 48 hours.
Right?
Is that common? Is that out there?
It is very common. I just saw a study too by another digital agency that put it out there at how many people took more than 24 hours to respond to an online inquiry. And it's so dangerous. If you're spending those dollars and you don't have those processes locked down in your intake department, you are just wasting dollars. You might as well set them on fire because you're not doing anything to help your firm with it. It's a very common thing. It's something that, when we work with when we work with law firms, we want a 2 to 3 minute window of response time.
Yeah.
If that, like, if you aren't doing that, then you
They're
might as well send it over.
Yeah, they're going to somebody else. They got something on their mind. I agree.
We moved, a couple of ours have moved over to ISA to answer those for them. So they just set their web forms and web inquiries up to go straight to the answering service so that there's somebody 24/7 that can answer those for them.
I think that's smart. I just think it's another part of intake that's just getting a lot of leakage.
There's a lot of leakage. It's crazy.
A lot of leakage. In fact, those are like big holes, like Swiss cheese holes. They're not little tiny holes. They're big holes.
Yeah. One of the things, Ken, that I'm also noticing in intake is a lot of people have gone to automated attendance, and they don't test their firms anymore about how quick does our intake department pick up when someone new is calling, and what's that process feel like. I know you had some ghost calling stuff for a while, but that is a super important piece of the process now with LSAs, because Google will also check to see how quickly you answer the phone. So you want to make sure that your people are responding timely and making sure they're answering those phones as quick as possible. So if you haven't tested your firm in a while, go back, make a phone call or two at all hours of the day and see where how quickly those phones are being answered. So you know that LSAs won't ding you for that.
Need to be answered at least on the second ring.
Oh, for sure, yes.
No more than the second ring.
Yeah.
First, if you can, but no more than the second.
Absolutely.
Well, good deal. Well, if people want to get up with you and because I know you love helping, you're like me, you love helping other law firms.
Yeah.
We both love it. How can they get up with you, Micki?
Yep, you can text me or call me, email me, whatever you'd like. My email address is mlove@cjadvertising.com. And my cell phone number is on the website at cjadvertising.com. So you can reach me anytime you want. Love to help, love to talk to people. So before we go, Ken, I just wanted to give a plug for your mastermind groups. I know you've got several of those groups out there, but for all the law firms listening, if you're not in a mastermind group, get with Ken, get in a mastermind group. I was just telling him when I got on, I went and did some consulting work with a firm that was in one of his mastermind groups and was just blown away at how much they had learned by just attending these meetings and being around other people who are trying to get to that next level. So I love it. I think it's one of the best things that helped us as a firm grow when I was younger in this market or in this vertical, if you will. And I think it helps all the firms that are in them today. So good job, Ken. I think it's one of the most valuable things that you're doing out there for firms.
I enjoy it too, as you know. I really enjoy it, and yeah, it is fun. And yeah, I believe in masterminds. I really do. I'm in a couple myself that has nothing to do with law firms. I just think it really helps you.
Yeah.
You don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah, and anytime you think you know everything, that's when it's the most dangerous, right?
Absolutely. I still learn stuff every day. You taught me something today. I mean, I love it when I can learn something.
Me too.
Really.
I love it.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Micki. I look forward to seeing you at the Ritz-Carlton and down in New Orleans. It's a great hotel. We'll have a good time, and you'll share a lot of knowledge as you always do, and we'll have a blast. And I hope that our listeners can make it down there, because it really is, in my opinion, the premier. There's some that are bigger, I'm not gonna lie, but I think ours is the one that gives you, it's not a big light show. I mean, it really is a lot of practical nuts and bolts. We got speakers like you that not just trying to sell something, you're trying to help people, and you give them really stuff that they can take back, implement, and watch their law firm grow. And that's what it's all about, really. I mean, you know.
I agree. I think the people you've picked to be on the agenda are some amazing people in this vertical, and they're all people who are passionate about it. So they share openly and just want other firms to be successful. So I'm proud to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Until next time, this is Ken Hardison, dedicated to your success.
You have been listening to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, the podcast that leads lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Go to growyourlawfirm.com to find more ways to market and manage your law firm. Please leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts.